Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Matthew Brown. I'm here with Dr. Andrew Vallow for Dental Unfiltered. We're going to talk about a really cool subject today. Honestly, it's one I'm not real familiar with. Andrew's going to take the lead on this. There's the subject of taxes. The old saying, the two things we can't avoid is death and taxes, right? And Andrew apparently can change that statement, or he can talk a little bit about how to avoid some taxes. This is always a subject. I look in all the Facebook groups, see all day long questions about taxes, questions about who is the right accountant for me. Is there a dental specific accountant? What is a strategy? Then I'm in the dental, I think it's the dental wealth Facebook group or the dental investment Facebook group. And this subject comes up in there all the time. And Andrew wants to talk about, how do we avoid taxes? And if you could avoid one of those two things, death and taxes would probably be the one to avoid because it allows you to enjoy your life a little bit more and to have a little more resources for your family and for growing your business. So Andrew, talk a little, explain kind of where the motivation came for doing this episode and kind of what your view is on this.
Hey guys, I want to start this episode by saying that I am not a CPA, a financial advisor, and this is not to be construed as financial or tax advice. However, I am very excited to share with you guys, how I was able to pay zero taxes last year legally. This is why I'm on this podcast talking about it, because everything I did was above board. Not that I think the IRS has time to listen to dental podcasts, but anyways. Basically, guys, for those that don't realize, the tax code is a big book, and it's basically a game where the government wants to incentivize you to do certain things, and if you can do those things, the reward is that you win and you don't have to pay taxes, or maybe more realistically is that you defer the taxes. You don't have to pay them right now or this year. There's a lot of strategies around trying to mitigate, the taxes that you owe, your tax burden. There's some different things with real estate investments, alternative investments, things like that. The cool thing for us dentists that own dental practices, is that we have another option that most of the general public does not. And that is growing your business in order to help not pay taxes. So it's a win-win situation in that you are creating a bigger, more valuable business in the long run. But at the same time, the expenses that go into doing that help offset the tax burden that you had for that year. So, I have dentists sometimes, ask me like, hey, like, what's your end game? Why are you growing so quickly? All that stuff. And, but besides the fact that I can't sit still, and I always have to be working on my next project, part of my motivation comes from working closely with my tax strategist team at Elliott Davis about how I can minimize or even eliminate the taxes that I owe that year. And basically my strategy so far, and what worked really well, this past year, is if your growth and your new business, so if you want to grow a dental group and you want to grow a dental group with startups, it makes it a lot easier to do this. So your growth just has to outpace, your current pace of your practices. And so, each year as the group gets bigger, essentially you need to open more practices to offset that growth. And so that's kind of the goal right now. That's, part of the reason why, we're looking to open even a couple more practices, hopefully this year. Now, there are tax advantages to acquiring practices as well as startups, but the big difference is, let's say that you acquire $1 million practice. There are certain parts of that acquisition that aren't written off the same way. So if you, and there's different ways to structure the deal, and that's part of the negotiation process. But the seller is motivated to categorize the value of the sale differently than the buyer because of the tax advantages to the seller versus the buyer. So things like goodwill. If you're buying a practice, you're not writing off goodwill like you would the dental equipment. When you do a startup, almost all of the expenses that go into that startup, you can write off 100%. The equipment, the build out cost, Basically, like anything you are spending to get that business open, more or less, is a tax write-off, and typically at 100%.
Yeah,
The only thing that maybe would not
the first year when you first open, that chunk is so big, it's going to eclipse what your tax liability is.
Right. So yeah. So for those of you that
is great.
Right. For those of you that have opened a startup, so that first year or whatever, you probably didn't really pay any taxes, because that those startup costs eclipsed whatever your other expenses were. And again, guys, keep in mind, I'm not a tax expert. I'm not a CPA. This is very basic level analysis that I'm giving, and maybe at some point I'll get some of our CPAs on here and we can do another episode with some more details. But the big picture way to think about it is, again, the bigger your group gets, if you want to mitigate most or all of your taxes, you've got to open more practices or buy more practices. But again, it's easier if you're opening because you can write off a higher percentage of that. So now, once again, you get a loan typically to open these practices. So that's the nice thing too, is I'm not coming out of my pocket, to spend the $500,000, on this next startup. I'm getting a loan from the bank for that $500,000 on a 10-year term, and I still get to write off that loan the same way as if I had spent that money out of my pocket. So it works exactly the same. You get to keep more cash. And as I've talked about before, guys, cash is king. So, this is how you can very, very quickly grow. And the more cash you keep, the more comfortable the bank feels lending you more money for the next practices.
Yeah,
so this is a strategy. This is not something for the faint of heart. But if you're sitting there and you've got, an ambitious mindset, you've got an abundance mindset, you're thinking like, man, I really, really want to grow a dental group. If you work closely with your tax strategist, you can plan the startups in a way that you can offset most or all of your taxes, which will allow you to continue to grow your cash, which will allow you to continue to get more funding to open more startups. So that has been my strategy more or less so far.
Going back to it, like you just said, if you're an aggressive doc, I think one thing, for some of the docs listening, doc, if you're listening right now and you're like in your operatory every day and you're in your office and your practice is successful, but you're feeling unfulfilled and you're like, man, I really want to drive forward and do more of this. I want more practices, but I feel like, so I talk about my uncle a lot. Everyone knows who he is. One of my favorite dentists in the world. Like I love the guy. I mean, he's the name of the practice is the Comfort Dentist. And, he is just probably one of the best people chairside ever. The guy brings warmth into the room, and he has some ambition for one to grow bigger. I think sometimes, and this is nothing against him, he's such a talented guy. Sometimes for people that are like very clinically focused, clinically trained, they want to grow and do this, but then a strategy like this isn't for the faint of heart, and then that instantly intimidates them, and they don't come out of their comfort zone and embrace it and go for it to get that growth that would make them feel fulfilled. You know what I'm saying? Like you'll have a guy like my uncle who's like honestly gifted dentist. I mean, gifted guy, and people deserve to experience more of him in more than one location and more of his flavor in dentistry. He will change people's lives through dental, right? But maybe that intimidation of a process like this and the leverage of it and the scariness of it will like keep them from allowing that great work to be done in the world, not just the financial part of it. But a lot of times these docs that are ambitious like this are also the docs that make the most difference for people because of the best chair side. Their personalities are very, very different.
Does your uncle, does he work for the DSO Comfort Dental, the one started by Rick Kushner?
No, he owns, no.
Okay.
He owns a single practice.
A similar name. Gotcha.
Similar name. He owns, so I have a deep, he was my second client ever. And he's actually my wife's uncle. He's actually older. We're 4 years apart in age. We share a lot of personal interests. We're both Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys. He owns a practice called the Comfort Dentist in Chesapeake, Virginia. And he does a lot of sedation dentistry. His whole thing from day one, I was really impressed with it, was he wanted to create a better overall patient experience for people and actually have people embrace dental. And every time he walks in an operatory, that same mission is present today that it was years and years and years ago when he first started his practice. And the growth of his practice reflects it. He's in like the big revenue range. He's never told me I can speak publicly about his numbers. I want to respect him, but let's just say he does well. And his practice Uncle Wes, don't get mad at me, isn't aesthetically the most pleasing practice. What makes his practice different is him. And all he needed was patience. I gave him the patience. And now there's lots of people in the Chesapeake, Virginia area that have smiles now that have had better experiences because of him. And he really embraces being the comfort dentist. Like, that is his goal. It's a really serious mission for him. But I think like he's one of those docs. Like, I think if he could embrace what you're talking about and kind of do that aggressive growth thing, I think the sky's the limit for him because he creates such a good culture around himself. Like he's that guy that naturally creates the culture, but there's a little bit of intimidation over. You're talking about this process being the faint of heart with growing kind of aggressively like this.
Well, so I think most dentists that are practice owners, they're aware of strategies, and I don't even know if I call it strategies. Your equipment vendors come knocking, in November, early December, and say, hey, why don't you buy this fancy toy so that you have a write-off, to help offset taxes. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but my point is, think about the ROI on that. Is this equipment something that's really going to increase the revenue in your practice? Is it going to really decrease the overhead? Whatever it is. You go buy $100,000 laser. Are you going to actually use it enough to get the ROI out of it? Because otherwise, you spend the $100,000, and some dentists will just, rather than even taking the equipment loan, they just take it out of their bank account. So, now you're decreasing cash to buy an expensive piece of equipment that may or may not turn ROI and may or may not really grow your group. And you still are probably also paying taxes, which is taking more cash out of your account. So on the flip side of that, rather than taking money out that is just gone, it goes to federal government. Who knows where they're sending it? We try not to really get into politics too much here, but I will say, as much as I would rather keep my money than, have to pay it in taxes, I think it hurts that much more because I don't necessarily agree with all the decisions that are being made on how our money is being spent, with the government. So, like, do I want to give my money to someone else to, in my mind, waste it? Yeah. Or would I rather keep my money in my bank account, take out another business loan from the bank, and use that to open another startup practice, which is going to have a huge ROI on my group? And at the same time, then because of those expenses from that business loan, not have to pay money to the government that in my mind is going to be wasted. So that's that big win-win for me right there, because I think a lot of people in their minds, they're like, oh, yeah, but why would I waste money just to save some money on taxes? But it's not wasting money to save money on taxes. It is investing in the growth of your business and your dental group to offset the taxes you'd have to pay that year. So it's a totally different scenario than buying some fancy toy that you're not going to use.
Yeah, and part of it. So let's talk about the mindset of somebody when looking at this equipment and they're trying to calculate the ROI on it, right? I talk about the Rizzos all the time. Sophie Rizzo and Sean Rizzo. They own a practice out Midwest, and they're probably two of my favorite docs. And the first time I ever did a demo with them, they picked up the phone in the middle of the demo and saw the potential in me providing them implants, and they bought a CBCT in front of me on the demo to prepare for being clients. And I was like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" Like, whoa, wait a minute, right? Well, they bought that with the spirit of they knew that they could get the ROI out of it. So they had a solid understanding that hey, I know my abilities. I know chairside, I can close this big treatment. I can bet on myself. I'm going to buy this thing. And they got the tax write-off, right? Sometimes docs, I was at a practice on the contrast. This is another kind of doc. I was at a practice actually here in North Carolina, and the practice had a technology room with a 3D printer, a mill. I mean, all the toys, bro. I mean, 90% of dentists would have walked in this technology room with jealousy. And this practice is doing $80K a month in collections. And I go in and I'm like, "Doc, how often do you use this stuff?" He goes, "Oh man, I'd love to use that 3D printer more. I just don't get the cases." Right? Sometimes you guys buy this stuff and you say, "Hey, if I do 5 arches or 6 arches, it pays for all this stuff." Or if I do this much Invisalign, this much clear aligner, it'll pay for this scanner, right? But when you calculate that, you have to ask your question. Do you really have the patient base for it? And can you actually do it? Because it's easy to say, if I do this many cases, it justifies this. But do all the elements exist there to really get that benefit out of that equipment? Or are you missing a component? like patient flow of the patients that have that need. So it's not just calculating the ROI, it's making sure that you can really bet on yourself with that ROI.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt. And so here's another option for you guys. It's on a little smaller scale. If you know that you're going to have a significant tax obligation and you're not quite ready to pull the trigger on another practice, but let's say you have a startup and you haven't equipped all the ops yet. This is something else that I'm going to do this year too. So my new offices in Riverview, we didn't start by equipping all 13 operatories. We are ordering more chairs to equip the other ops this year. And once again, that's a tax write-off. And once again, I'm doing an equipment loan for it because guess what? You can get an equipment loan with a 3.99%. Even in today's market where, business loans are 6.5% or whatever, mortgages are 7%. These equipment companies are motivated to get you to buy more equipment. So they actually offer preferred rates often on the equipment. So 3.99%, get a loan on these chairs. You equip, 4 or 5 rooms, there's at least 50, 60 grand that you can help write off against your taxes. You're not taking anything out of your bank account, but your tax obligation for that year is lower. And again, win-win, guys. Even if you don't think you really need the chairs, how nice would it be to have those extra chairs there so that an emergency walks in, you don't really have time, but now you can flip same-day treatment. You're running behind, now you've got another room to put patients in. All of a sudden you realize, hey, we're growing faster than I thought. Now you've got another room to put another hygienist in. So, I'm always of the mindset that you should grow before you think you really need it. You should add more treatment rooms. You should add more positions to help catalyze the growth of your practice into that next phase. But why not do it strategically so that you can also help offset your taxes that way? So again, guys, I know there's a million strategies out there for tax mitigation. I'm not an expert on commercial real estate, although I think we are going to get a commercial real estate expert dentist on here for an episode sooner or later. I'm not an expert on alternative investments, although that is something that is interesting to me as well. I am an expert at growing dental groups. And I can tell you with certainty, if you're strategic about it, you can grow your group, increase your equity, increase your profits, increase your top line revenue, and at the same time, decrease your tax obligation legally. It's a game. You just have to play by the rules. And you have to be aggressive. You've got to have an abundance mindset. You've got to have confidence in yourself. But if you can do those things, you can do exactly what I'm doing and very quickly grow a group of practices and still potentially pay zero in taxes legally.
Let's break it down in simple elements, right? So part of this question is, how are you utilizing this expansion plan to avoid taxes, but also enable you to grow more aggressively, right? That's really what it's about, right? And then docs hold themselves back. So it's like, part of that really is like, guys, are you confident enough in yourselves to always bet on yourselves? The reality is this, guys, listen to me very carefully. There is this thing in dental business that I don't understand where everyone goes, man, dental business is so hard. Like it's really bizarre to me. And please don't anyone get upset when I discount this. I am not a dental guy in dental. I am a different person from a different industry who is now in dental, looking at it from a different point of view. I've been in a lot of other industries. Dental business is one of the most target-rich environments in the world. Think about this. Let's bring in the basic business fundamentals. Does every single person on this planet need you? Yes. Is everyone in fear of you? Yes. Fear is a great resistance barrier. It's the best. If someone makes it to your chair, they want treatment. You're in one of the best business scenarios ever in the world. And the other great part of this is, guys, your margins are ginormous. So not only do you have a target-rich environment, you have the greatest resistance barrier on the planet. Compared to other businesses on an individual service level, your margins are great. So if you can't make it work, there is a fundamental problem with how you're approaching all of this. And if you can't bet on yourself, if you're like me and Andrew all the time, I don't care what the task is. I just started buying practices in Texas. Me and Ryan talk about it all the time. Like, what are we doing? We've never owned a practice. We're actually in a meeting today with our DSO partners. And Ryan said, hey guys, none of us have ever grown a DSO before. there's gonna be stumbling blocks, right? But the deal is, me and Ryan can bet on ourselves, right? If you feel like you can't, then my recommendation is figure out why you feel like you can't and self-improve in that area with the goal of getting to here. Don't just stop yourself.
Fortune favors the bold, guys.
It does. It's just go for it, man. Roll the dice.
Take that risk. If you've been thinking about doing something for the last few months, but you're scared to pull the trigger, just do it. Seriously, like, you're going to figure it out. But at the same time, if you let fear hold you back, you're going to waste years of your life and you're going to be way farther behind than you could have been. So anyways, again, disclaimer to end this episode, not a CPA, not a financial advisor, not a tax advisor, but big picture, if you want to grow your group strategically, you can help mitigate your taxes at the same time and have a win-win there. So that's kind of the whole point of this episode. As always, guys, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. It's docvallowdds@gmail.com. If you want introduced to my tax team at Elliott Davis, I'm happy to do that. I will tell you, they kind of specialize in emerging groups, growing groups. So, honestly,
we use Elliott Davis. Elliott Davis is great. We use Elliott Davis.
They're not cheap. Like, I'll be honest with you guys. Like,
no, they're the best.
A cheaper local tax guy. But if you've got a group that's growing and you want someone who really knows what they're doing, they've been incredible to work with. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the content, please take a second and share the episode. Leave us a review. If you're not already, hit that follow button so you get notified when we release new episodes. Typically, we are releasing a new episode every single Wednesday. That's always the goal. And we've got lots more great content coming for you guys here soon. So thanks for listening. We appreciate you guys, and I hope everyone has a great day.
You guys, please like, subscribe, follow. Please leave us reviews. We read every review. It rewards me and Andrew a lot. If you find this episode really helpful, please share it with your friends. Share it on social media. Share it in the groups. Me and Andrew do this because we really want to put out content that actually helps dentists and is positive. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day.